Wasabi guys, welcome back to another 10 Commander Pickups video. It's been a little while, but I am returning to the series where I go over 10 cards that you should consider picking up because they're pretty cheap, and they most certainly have future playability. They have a lot of potential at the very least to see increased play in the future. This is a little bit different than my more popular series, 10 underrated cards, because underrated isn't always an indication of how cheap a card is. So for this video, it's going to be focusing strictly on cards that are pretty cheap, and the combined total value of all 10 cards on this list, we're talking $8.34. Keep in mind, we're not talking about bulk commons here, we're talking about some pretty good ones, mostly rares. The first one here is Archons Grace, a 4-mana mono-white Archon with flying lifelink of 3/4. This is a creature that really synergizes with enchantment decks, and especially with that cool commander option Alayla, only around 37 cents from Theros Beyond Death. To me, that is ridiculously low for what it does. I get it, enchantment decks are a bit of a niche, but they're going to see increased play because of the increased popularity of commanders like Alayla. I mean, we're not just talking about any old tokens, we're talking about 2/2 flying tokens that this creature gives lifelink to. The second card here is Angel of the Ruins, a pretty new card from Commander 2021, 7-mana mono-white artifact angel with flying, a 5/7. When it enters, you exile up to 2 artifacts and/or enchantments. It's basically Return to Dust on an ETB. Also has plane cycling, so if you want to, you can pay 2 mana, get rid of it, discard it, and you get to search up a planes card. Only 60 cents, this card is way too good, and I really do see it going up in price. It really helps to think of all the different uses for a card, where it can fit, to get a proper understanding of what this card's value is going to be. So plane cycling means that it's going to fit into those cycling strategies. It's also going to fit into a lot of graveyard strategies. Exhuming cards is actually pretty common in more competitive decks. So if you're able to dump this into your graveyard and bring it back pretty early on, that's a great ETB. Third card here is Ghostly Pilfer. When it becomes untapped, you get to pay 2 mana. If you do, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, you draw a card, and you get to discard a card. Ghostly Pilfer can't be blocked this turn. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to synergize with. For only just a 2-mana Spirit Rogue, there's a lot to love about this creature, and for only 93 cents from M21, I think that's a pretty good deal. If you can find these, if you can trade for these, go ahead and do it. It's pretty competitive, it sits on the field, while you benefit from things like your opponent casting their commander, because whenever they cast a spell from anywhere other than their hand, that would include the command zone, you get to draw a card. It's so simple, but that's what you look to take advantage of in this game. Even if it's not drawing you a ton of cards constantly, just a couple cards every now and then, I think it's well worth it. The next card here is Tortured Existence. You might have seen this card brought up quite often with my Sephirus of the Hidden Ways commander deck tax. It's also my number 1 card if you're looking to upgrade that deck as a whole. This 1-mana black common from Stronghold is only 92 cents. For what it does and how little mana you actually have to spend in order to take advantage of it, I think it belongs in a lot of black decks in the format. You're only paying 1 mana to choose and discard a creature card to bring a creature card back from your graveyard to your hand. I've already talked about how Sephirus can abuse that ability, but this can easily be abused in really any other black reanimator strategy out there. And I think I should explain here, I'm not saying at all that these cards are top tier, they're going to take your deck to the next level. I just think that they're going to see play more often in the future, and because of that, their prices are going to go up. People are going to look for something that's obscure like this, hasn't been printed that often, only really reprinted in the list. Next card here is Draugr Necromancer from Kaldheim, a 4-mana snow creature zombie cleric, mono black 2, a 4/4. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. You may cast spells from among cards and exile your opponent's own with ice counters on them, and you get to spend mana from snow sources as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. Now the obvious here is that you're going to have to use snow-covered lands in order to really take advantage of that. But if you have the mana to be able to cast most of what you want anyway, it shouldn't be much of a problem. That's really the only drawback to this, is that you really do want these snow-covered lands. But for only 31 cents, this is something that is incredibly strong. Being able to mess with those graveyard aristocrat strategies, that is huge. When it comes to maintaining a board presence, when it comes to getting back into a game, if you're constantly able to maintain your board presence, you're practically unstoppable, and graveyard decks do this better than most other strategies. So dealing with those death triggers is half the battle. If you can exile those creatures instead of letting them just die, they don't get their death trigger. So it's perfect hate, and for only 31 cents, that is awesome. The next card here is Goblin Bombardment. This card's been reprinted a bunch, I know, but for Modern Horizons 2, for 97 cents, you have one of the best sack outlets in red, outside of artifact sack outlets like Ashnod's Altar. Goblin Bombardment is very unique because it's one of the only sack outlets that really lets you deal damage without having to pay any extra mana. So for just sacrificing a creature, it's going to deal 1 damage to any target. This is a combo piece. If you have ways of getting infinite creatures, you have infinite damage. For some similar reasons why something like Impact Tremors or Perforos would be strong, Goblin Bombardment is also strong in many of those same situations. It's just slightly more dependent on your creature production. But you're also going to take advantage of sacrificing with aristocrat strategies too. But ultimately, I must emphasize that this is still an above average mono red sack outlet. And while compared to some of these other cards, I don't think it's going to shoot up that much, it's always going to be useful. 97 cents means you're not risking much. You're definitely getting your money's worth. The next card here is Soulfire Eruption. This insane mythic from Commander Legends is only 48 cents. 9 mana, that's pretty expensive to get to in red. Even though we do have a newer commander in Prosper Tome Bound who can take advantage of using a lot of treasure tokens to get to 9 and really take it up a notch with this card, I still think what it does is pretty reasonable. You choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, and or players. For each of them, you get to exile the top card of your library, then Soulfire Eruption deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to that permanent or player. You may play the exiled cards until the end of your next turn. That's the key thing here. You get a whole nother turn to play them. And this might be a knock against the card. You're spending all that mana to wait till your next turn, which you're probably not going to get. If your opponents are wise, they want to deal with you before you get to do that. However, for only 48 cents, you have a Hail Mary card in red. Red, as I've explained several times, it's not the color of precision, it's the color of taking chances. Red wouldn't be red if there wasn't any risk involved. The next card here is Bounty of Skimfar. This is from the Lathril pre-constructed deck that released alongside the Kaldheim set. Really the elf-focused deck here, 3 mana, green sorcery. Reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and an elf card from among them into your hand, and then you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. There's some other cards in that deck that I think people might be looking for, but Bounty of Skimfar is a brand new card. You know, it's not a reprint, it's only been printed one time in that pre-con deck, and we know how that sometimes can go. First time printings in these pre-con decks, they either sink or soar, and this one so far has been sinking, only 20 cents, but this has a ton of upside for elf decks, and elf decks, as we all know, are some of the most popular tribal decks. So if you're looking for a tribal specific sorcery for elf decks, it's going to ramp you in the same way that something like a Cultivate or a Kadama's Reach will. In addition to that, it's also going to make it easy for you to get another elf to your hand. So while you probably wouldn't need to ramp with something that expensive in an elf deck, it is multi-purposed. The next card here is Sterling Grove. The green-white enchantment that's been reprinted in Modern Horizons 2, significantly cheaper now if you are going for this version. The original one from Invasion is still going to be a bit pricier, but for only $2.40, you're getting yourself a pretty competitive card. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, and you can pay a mana to sack it, search for an enchantment, and put it on top of your library. And if your deck is playing green and white, and a healthy amount of enchantments, it is an auto-include. I just don't think we're ever going to see something like this that's this powerful, that's going to prevent your opponents from interacting with your board like this, while also offering you a way to search up some combo pieces like a food chain. It's just ridiculous, and while it is the most expensive card in this video, I think you'll understand $2.40 for this card is a steal. And the last card is Cinder Vines. Red and green, also a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Cinder Vines deals 1 damage to that player. Similarly to Sterling Grove, you also have an activated ability where you can pay a mana and sacrifice the enchantment to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Cinder Vines deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. This card is only $1.16, but you are also getting some pretty good value here for only 2 mana. Red and green is not super competitive in Commander, so you sometimes need to bring your opponents down to your level. Stop casting all these competitive non-creature spells, focus on the traditional way of winning games through combat. This encourages them to not cast as many spells, and it also hurts them whenever they want to play those non-creatures like artifacts and enchantments, because you have a pretty affordable way of sacrificing this to get rid of those permanents. It's also well designed because since that's an activated ability, there are fewer ways of countering that if you do decide to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. So anyway, everybody, let me know what you think about these 10 Commander pickups. All of these prices come from my research on Scryfall, and I stand by all of these cards. I think they're fantastic. Ultimately, it's about playing with good cards, and I think these are all definitely good cards that could go up in price. So you have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.